Well, hello everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And as my technical prowess has not been very helpful, not been proved yet this morning on Rumble, I've started the stream over again, and I'm expecting Hrvoje to join me in just a moment. So there he is. He's here, and welcome. All
Hello again.
well, yeah, well, hello again. I'm probably still blushing because I get embarrassed when I can't do technical things. But anyway, I'll settle down, and I am now hopefully live on Facebook, McDuff Lives 2, Twitter, and Rumble. And let me put my head around the corner and see if I can get a signal from my wife if she can look at me on Rumble.
I think I'm looking at the Rumble. Let's see. Yes, I think I see ourselves on Rumble. I think.
So anyway, oh, Rose Belitza says, yes, we are there. And so thank you, Rose, and Laura's here, and other people will be joining us, I'm sure, because we finally got together. So you were giving us a bit of a biography, and I really do appreciate learning a little bit about your life in Croatia and Chicago as a child, and then Mongolia. Geneva is where we left off. So I'm fascinated with Geneva. It's principally French speaking there. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, international. 50% of the populace in any given moment in Geneva usually is they're foreigners. Because that's where the seat of the world government is, right? All of the international organizations, the NGOs, but yeah, they principally speak French. It was very international, though. Everyone speaks multiple languages, but usually, French.
So you must have had to pick that up.
No, I just for whatever reason I couldn't pick up French, and they've got an attitude
I
problem.
understand.
They
Believe
got
me.
an attitude problem. Every time I would try to speak some French, they would speak English.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when I needed to speak English, when I didn't know French, they refused. I mean, I went to my local bakery in Geneva for 6 months. I'm like an idiot pointing, using the few little French that I know at the pastries, thinking the person doesn't speak English because they never wanted to speak English with me. And then after 6 months, I noticed another customer comes in speaking in English, and the baker responds in fluent English. I'm like, I'm here like an idiot with these French, and you won't speak English with me. So I know they have a bit of an attitude problem. The French, I'm not ashamed to say that.
Yeah, well, that's I just had to know because I struggled with French myself, and it's quite a challenge.
Mongolian was easier for me than French. I don't know what to tell you.
Now, I bet you're quite fluent in Spanish by now, though.
Well, I'm a Mexican citizen, so yeah. I mean, I still make errors. I'm not perfect, but yeah, I'm fluent in Spanish. So
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm gonna probably show up down there in Guadalajara to say hello sometime because wow, I've never been there. I've never been to Mexico at all, so got a lot of exploring to do. Now that I've got time, put the law practice behind me, and my wife just retired, so maybe we'll show up.
bienvenido. Very welcome, and there's a mass of people flooding into Mexico. I mean, even the president commented because there's this now feud between the U.S. and Mexico, and they were pointing out, these American congressmen are trying to paint Mexico as like Afghanistan, and they had a good point. They're like, the Mexican president said, I think one of the journalists, that there's a record number of Americans, especially elderly, moving permanently to Mexico. So if it was so dangerous, then why are so many Americans moving down to Mexico? That proves the point that it's not as dangerous as the U.S. government wants people to think. So,
Yeah, Geneva. All of as you mentioned yourself, supposedly the capital of the empire of the world. The Bank of International Settlements is close by, isn't it? And anyway, the whole idea of Switzerland, Swissyland, as some people call it, being the secret capital of the forthcoming world empire. How do you feel about that?
Well, I never looked at it as, I think there are a number of seats of the empire, and again, I view it as world government. So, I mean, it's a global infrastructure that's, I feel we're already in it. So it's already built. It's being built, and yeah, you got the WTO there. I think I visited it. I was at the WHO during the 62nd World Health Assembly. So yeah, all of that stuff is I visited the Lutz's Trust. Right, I've mentioned this before in interviews, but they got 3 offices: New York, London, and Geneva. They were founded in 1922 as the Lucifer Publishing Company, and they were inspired by Theosophist Helena Blavatsky, and the founder of Lucifer Publishing was Alice Bailey. They changed their name to Lutz's Trust. They're an official NGO with the United Nations, and they literally believe, I attended one of their meetings, their office right across from the UN in Geneva. They believe that Lucifer, Satan, Lucifer, is the Messiah, is the Christ, and they say that he's here right now, and they're preparing for his return, sort of, as the coming world leader. So it's an official NGO, been around for a century, officially affiliated with the UN, and they believe that, Satan is the Messiah. And in their own words, I mean, I got the documents from the meeting. It says that they consider him to be like Prometheus, who brought fire to the minds of men, and then when he returns, he will be the Christ to the Christians. He will be the Mahdi to the Muslims. He will be the Maitreya to the Buddhists. And so, a little, that's kind of weird stuff. But yeah, I mean, my focal point is world government. You see it everywhere now, and the European Union is the model for this system. And now we see in North America, Secretary of State Blinken and Mexican President AMLO last fall were discussing copying the EU to integrate Canada, USA, and Mexico. Now you have in Latin America discussion. Former, Rafael Correa, former Ecuadorian president, said he wants to copy the EU and create a Latin American Union. And so, yeah, we're watching world government being built before our eyes.
And the financial system. My latest comment is I think that they're intentionally crashing the U.S. dollar right now. Your opinion on that?
Yes, I think I was discussing this yesterday on my TNT show. Someone pointed to a World Economic Forum article from 5 years ago and it was Chinese experts at the World Economic Forum discussing how the U.S. dollar, that a new world reserve, and that for the longest time, people like, Jim Rickards and others have been talking about this, and I've believed this for over a decade. Because to have a world government, you have to have a multipolar system. People are thinking that the multipolar system, they have the opposite now. BRICS and the multipolar system is being sold as a salvation. It's like, no, that's actually the way towards this world government, because world government is a world federation, which is multipolar. It's like the 50 states, of the constitutional states of the U.S. under one federal system. So it would be the 200 countries of the world under one world federal system. That's multipolarity. So people are going to figure this out later as we move into the multipolar system. And so what they talk about is we're in this unipolar system with the dollar reserve, and things have to even out. The dollar has to decline. And in that World Economic Forum piece, they discuss what's going to replace the dollar reserve, the IMF, International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights, SDR. And in that paper from 5 years ago, they discussed a digital SDR, and then sort of like all of the world's currencies would be linked to this IMF SDR, and that would be the one world currency, basically, which would be controlled, like you said, by the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, and the world's central banks. And then it would be digital because they're bringing us into these central bank digital currencies. So every country is going to have a CBDC. And then it's going to be like one big happy global social credit system where if you don't do what the government says, they just shut off your accounts.
Well, it sounds like if the dollar goes down, I won't have any accounts. That that's the other scary scenario. Everyone in this country is depending for their livelihood and their old age on Social Security, a pension, or a 401k plan, and if all those things are invested in these exotic derivatives, and ultimately the last card comes out of the card tape, the house of cards, and things crash. Well, we're all looking to be broken. That's something that people just are not willing to look at, not willing to face it.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, is this neo-techno feudalism. They want to bring us back to the Middle Ages, so wipe out the middle class. They've been doing that for a long time, but during the pandemic was really when it accelerated, wiping out mom and pop stores all across the world. Like here in Mexico, I forget the numbers, but you've got little small, mom and pop Mexican tienditas, corner shops and little markets, and they got wiped out as, the Costco's and the Walmarts, which are all over the place here in Mexico. Amazon were gaining their monopoly in the market. But, I think you'll still have an account in the US, but it's just the money will be worth much less. And the system will be controlled, because if you have this digital currency, they can program your money, they can make it expire, they can, shut off your account or limit your account, like some of us are already experiencing on Patreon and PayPal, where and people are having bank accounts closed. Like you had Jeremy McKenzie in Canada recently, 14-year military veteran. He's got a podcast. So for political thought crime, the Scotiabank shut off his bank account. I just read 3 days ago, another Canadian got his bank account. He got a letter from BMO Bank, which they're shutting his account. And so more and more, you're going to see this sort of thing happen to dissidents. Whether you're a dissident religiously, politically, you don't believe the climate narrative, you don't believe the transgender LGBT narrative, and the list will become longer. People, it's what that German, was a priest, pastor said. They didn't come for the communists. I wasn't a communist. And then they came for the Catholics. I wasn't a Catholic. Finally, they came for me, so.
Yeah. And they're coming for you. What you going to do when they come for you? Well, they're coming. And, if we keep our critical thinking skills in action, which I was taught to do. I mean, I thought developing critical thinking was part of being a good citizen. And now it's like, no, don't think, just obey. And that message seems to be sinking in with people. It's very frightening. I really appreciate your comment on the BRICS. It's one of the things that I've thought about is that, and, like President Lula down in Brazil, Modi, and Putin, of course, and the others, but the idea that these people are going to start a financial system without breaking away and actually break away from the current system doesn't make sense. They're going to be financed by Goldman Sachs, just like the one we have now is, if I'm not mistaken, and it's not going to be an increase in freedom for anybody. It's just a different system that's going to be used to usher in that federal system. And when you mention that federal system of world government, that's exactly what they've been aiming for all along, to take away sovereignty. And it's funny, I think about my good friends at the Schiller and LaRouche Institute, and how they are very excited about the BRICS, but at the same time, they're also very excited about sovereignty. And, the idea of we can't be free unless we have a sovereign country. So there's a couple of conflicting ideals that we all have these conflicting ideals that we want to have our cake and eat it too. But Well, how do you see the issue of sovereignty going forward in the world? Is sovereignty dead?
I think it is, and I've interviewed a lot of the LaRouche people. Diane Sayre, who's running for Senate, Harley Schlanger, Burke,
Yeah.
Daniel Burke, I forget, Jason Ross, a lot of folks and we agree on a lot, but I think ultimately longer term they're optimistic where I'm not. I feel like pushing further, I feel like BRICS will become that system. And just to comment on that, I mean, there is an interesting report from Cambridge from last month called "Can BRICS De-Dollarize the Global Financial System?" And they do come to the conclusion that BRICS's coalitional de-dollarization initiatives have established critical infrastructure for a prospective alternative non-dollar global financial system. But it's funny you mentioned Goldman Sachs, because just late last year, I kind of went back and revisited. I wanted to see what was the origin of the BRICS idea. And it came from an ex-Goldman Sachs banker, and this young lady, she was actually a World Economic Forum young global leader. So this Goldman Sachs banker, WEF young global leader, came up with the BRICS idea. So again, I'm like, come on. And often some of my guests say, and I would agree, the East, Eurasia, Russia, China, they generally don't offer new ideas. They're just copying the Western stuff. So it's not like, they had this great idea for multipolarity. It's just like, and they don't have the capital. They're using the Western, Goldman Sachs, and
That's what I'm thinking.
China was built up by Western finance. Anthony Sutton and many other people talk about this. Bill Gates went into China in the 90s and established Microsoft and the AI Center in China to help China develop all of this stuff. I mean, so they didn't do anything on their own. And so, yeah, I'm forgetting your question or anything else. Oh, sovereignty. I've interviewed Gregory Copley, very fascinating guy. He's head of the International Strategic Studies, I think, Association. He's worked with many, famous diplomats, and he's got a long view of history. He says, democracy is over. We're in a period of authoritarianism and tyranny. And I think democracy is dead. We're living now in technocracy, neo-feudalism, and I believe we're already in world government. Everywhere I look, I can't find any hope in politicians. I mean, here in Mexico, mayors, the mayor of where I live, the governor, full-on globalist, and I can prove it to you. I'm not exaggerating. Like, I got the white papers. I'm living in a smart city. It's literally financed by the Rockefeller Foundation, and the governor. It totally linked to these global transnational interests. So from Mexico to Kazakhstan to Croatia to US, they're all captured. So where is this sovereignty then? And the pandemic showed that, like, when there are Croatian or Mexican or American national holidays where people whip out the flags, I don't feel patriotic anymore, because I'm like, there's no Croatia anymore. We live in this European Union Nazi fascism. We don't have our currency. Since for 2 months we got the euro. We dropped our national currency. What sovereignty? We don't even have our own currency.
And yet we in the United States are fully convinced that we do have sovereignty. We have a constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. We have all of these historical precedents that are still important to us. And we have a Supreme Court that says that they are the supreme law of the land. And the Constitution is the supreme law, and they're the final arbiters of what the Constitution says. So we should have a tight sovereign system with no leaks in it. The problem, of course, is that the people that make the most money in the world don't observe that. And well, I want to now look at the one that a lot of people are still hoping is there for the sovereignty of his own country, and that, of course, is Vladimir Putin. And Russia and the Ukraine special military operation. it's a horrible, horrible conflict with a 1,200-mile front line that looks like Verdun or something. With when you look at the flyovers of the disastrous bombing of everything. Um, I'm curious as to how you see Vladimir Putin and what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough nut to crack. I went to Russia, I think 6 years ago. I shook hands with the late Mikhail Gorbachev. We spent 2 hours with him. Vladimir Posner, another very famous Russian figure. I just had on my podcast Dr. Vladimir Kozin, who we also met, who spoke to us. He's of the Russian Military Academy of Sciences. He's of the view that we're inching closer to a third world war. So I think in some senses, I mean, Russia's defending itself right now. And people will disagree, but I think if you look at history, what happened in Ukraine was provocation by the West. And so Russia's defending itself on one hand. On the other, I do think there do exist these, imperial ambitions, like for rebuilding, reshoring its civilizational sort of status. And then what's important, going into this world government, nations can no longer exist. They can no longer exist. They can no longer exist alone. Others have said this. Daniel Estulin, who I've interviewed, who lives down in Mexico, he's former Russian FSB. He's also made this point that you have to now form a regional bloc to survive. The rules of the game have changed, so you can't exist anymore as a nation. You have to join a North American Union, a South American Union, European Union. And so my former employer, Nazarbayev, in 1994, they say it was his idea for a Eurasian Union. And then Putin and Nazarbayev have been pushing their version of this. And so I find on one respect that Putin is trying to defend his civilization of Russia, Orthodox Russia, the Orthodox, some of those traditions. But I do also see him playing the globalist game. So it's kind of, and I view AMLO, the Mexican president, as a globalist. I mean, he's come out and said, we want world government. I want a North American Union. He's globalist, but it's like a different flavor of globalism. It's less psychopathic than some of these Western globalists that just want to, in Australia, the Anglosphere that just wants to throw its citizens in these COVID concentration camps, deplatform, So, yeah, it's complicated, but I can see both coming from Putin, that he does want to retain some semblance of sanity, but at the same time, he's also pushing some of these globalist projects. So it's there are contradictions,
Yeah, well, I was hoping you'd have a crystal ball and tell me what the future is with Vladimir Putin and Ukraine. Yeah, I do love the idea of Putin standing up for the sovereignty and rebuilding the mythical past glory of Russia. And I'd like to see the United States rebuild itself in the mythical path of the founding fathers, as corrected through history with the wars and things that we've gone through. It doesn't seem to be in the cards, though. America seems to the idea of America has been taken down. Which I get the Strauss name mixed up, but there was a guy named Strauss that said in the early 50s that what they really needed to do was to equalize the standard of living of the Americans with the rest of the world. And that's really what's been going on, is that as we came out of World War II, we won, we were going to be the dominant economy of the world. And we had ships everywhere and the best planes and the best military, and our industry was all fired up. But instead of building upon the victory, the powers that be within this country were subverted to these schemes that involve, in fact, doing the opposite of destroying the economic integrity of this country. And they've done a hell of a job of it. It's a huge disaster to America, and yet we Americans still think we're living on top of the world, that we're everybody else is worse off than we are. So why change, even though, change seats on the Titanic before it goes down? I'm just going to stay where I'm at, stay in my 401k, and, hope that Joe Biden fixes everything.
Yeah, I've got a comment. I just want to mention someone in the comments says Gorbachev was a globalist tool. Yeah, for sure. That doesn't mean you can't meet with these people. He was a total one world government, Gorbachev. He founded his Green Foundation that pushed the green agenda and world government. So, people shouldn't have this simplistic binary view of, just because you meet with someone, you're, who wouldn't want to meet with some of these, interesting figures? I went to Lutz's Trust. Does that mean I'm a Satanist? No. But what you're saying, there's a shocking video clip that I talked about a couple months back. Chrystia Freeland, the vice, I think, the deputy prime minister of Canada, she came out and it said exactly this. It was so shocking how blunt she basically said that Canadians and Westerners, that we need to, that our standard of living needs to decrease so that the Indians and the Eastern world can increase. And that's been the global, because to have it's a technical thing to have a global government. It's take the EU as an example and the purported North American Union. You've got these 30 different countries, 28, that have different economic levels. And so to have some minimal integration, you can't have a country that's so wealthy and so poor, because when it comes to the financing of things, they have to sort of bring it closer together. So using the EU as the blueprint again. Same thing with Canada, USA, and Mexico. So I think that's what I think COVID was actually used to do this, where they left Mexico wide open and they locked down Canada and the US, and that forced many Canadians to migrate to Mexico. And for the longest time, we've had many Mexicans migrating up north. So you're mixing the population, and the standard of living is declining in the US, where it's increasing in Mexico. So we're nearing, once that balance happens, then you can form that union. And so what you're saying, at a global level, you have to have some sort of cultural homogenization, economic, political. So, we talked about the economic, the world currency, the free trade system. And then we've got the cultural, I was out in Kazakhstan. Everyone around the world, they consume Hollywood, Netflix, YouTube, Google. There's a Starbucks everywhere, KFC, McDonald's, Walmarts. And so that's that cultural homogenization and this economic homogenization. So yeah, it's the standard of living in the West is declining and will continue to decline, if you ask me.
Now, you remind me to ask you about Kazakhstan. When were you there?
From 2017 to 2020.
Okay, and that was during the time, or was it? When was there a kind of a revolt in? Not in a.
That was, I think, last year, 2022.
And what was that about?
So this is funny because I wrote my graduate thesis in Geneva on color revolutions, and color revolution is a strategy that the U.S. Well, it's the globalists. You can't even say U.S. government anymore. They use the U.S. government as a weapon. So it's the infrastructure is USAID, Soros Open Society, National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA front, and they go around overthrowing countries which are not on board with the world government globalist project. So any independent country, Venezuela, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Kazakhstan, many of the different stans. And so when I came in 2017, I was actually talking about this to the Kazakhs. And I discovered one of my students after class, excellent English, high school kid, and she just wants to talk about politics and human rights and freedom. And we're talking, and then she tells me she wrote an essay. And I'm like, for what? For which class? And she's like, oh, it's not for the school. It's for this extracurricular association. I'm like, okay. And she shows me the certificate she got. It's in Cyrillic, but I can read Cyrillic, and it says she wrote an essay. She got an award from the National Endowment for Democracy, and this is rural Kazakhstan. And I find she gives me. I'm like, give me the name of this NGO. I go to their website. Right on the website, in the bottom, it says financed by and this NGO is all over Kazakhstan. They got many offices, and and it literally says financed by National Endowment, Open Society, USAID. And I tell my supervisors, I'm like, I'm concerned for the sovereignty of Kazakhstan. I don't want the American empire to overthrow Kazakhstan. And then I actually got visited by Kazakh internal security. This guy took me out to lunch. He studied abroad, so he's my age. He spoke perfect English. So the Kazakh, intelligence security took me out to lunch, and we were discussing this. I think they were vetting me at the same time. Like, this guy's got 3 passports. Is he CIA? And I'm like, no, I'm genuinely concerned about your country. I don't want Kazakhstan to be overthrown. That's wrong. That's not liberty. That's not. Those are not American principles. And that was like 2018, 2019. And I was warning them about a color revolution. So what happened, a year or two later? Exactly that, what I was talking about. And so I think a year ago, it was 14 months now, you saw in Kazakhstan these protests. And I think that was an attempt. Again, it failed. I think Kazakhstan, and with the help of Russia, were able to stop it. And so it didn't succeed. And I think that's what that was all about. And now we see in Georgia, they ran the color revolution, Rose Revolution in 2003 with Saakashvili. They're trying again in Georgia. They're trying now in Bosnia. One of the Bosnian leaders openly said that Soros's Soros's presence in the Balkans their office was in Albania. They just moved the head of their office to Sarajevo, and they want to instigate that in Bosnia. In Pakistan, they just did a regime change successfully. They succeeded. They even tried to assassinate Imran Khan. And so, yeah, I mean, they're ramping this stuff up again.
All over the world. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have you. You have been observing this, and you can explain it to us quickly, and I do appreciate that very much. Kazakhstan, Astana, right, is the mythical. I mean, when it hit, I guess 5 years ago, I suddenly realized there was a place called Astana, and I thought, Satan, Satana. And then I said, oh, let me look at it. And it's got these incredible street scenes of, with this kind of a sun monument in the middle of the city. And I mean, it looks like an Illuminati world or universal capital in the making. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I was there, and the original capital used to be Almaty, which is in the south, and then they moved the capital, I think in the 90s, I can't recall, to Astana. There was nothing there. There was nothing there, and so they just built from the ground up Astana, which is kind of plays into what you're saying. They changed the name to Nur Sultan for a couple of years, and now they changed it back to Astana because of the de-Nazarbaification process. And so, yeah, and I've been to Nazarbayev's library there in Astana for certain events, and he's got this huge library foundation, all of this memorabilia from his 30 years as president, meeting with the world leaders. And I saw some of his books that openly, like, I think one of the books actually had the title about globalism. So Nazarbayev is a full-on, esoteric occult globalist. So it's no surprise what you're saying, they've got all this stuff going on. And so, yeah, I can't say anything further about it being like some world capital. I've seen some of that stuff on forums, but nothing concrete. It's just like forum stuff. Nothing really hardcore to roll with. Maybe for that region, it's going to be important. I don't know if it's going to be important, I don't think it would be some global center of power because Kazakhstan is too far, removed. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
And one other point on Kazakhstan, Warren Buffett reportedly has a bank of nuclear fuel rods and nuclear power that he keeps in Kazakhstan. You know anything about that?
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't be surprised because when I was there, I was in the process of opening a stock account to be able to invest in Kazakh companies because they're like the Switzerland of Central Asia. and they have a monopoly on the world's uranium. I mean, Kazakhstan,
Yeah.
among all of the other countries, Kazakhstan is by far the wealthiest, in that whole region. So just like the Saudi Arabia of Central Asia, and so they've got 40% of the world's uranium. Kazatomprom, the Kazakh government's uranium company, and I was telling my Kazakh friends, like, open an account, invest in your own country, buy the what's it called, the Kazakh cell companies and uranium. And the stock at that time of Kazatomprom tripled in price. When I was thinking of buying it and telling people, then later on it tripled in price because uranium is going to be important going forward in terms of nuclear energy. And so I definitely wouldn't doubt that Buffett's got invested in Kazakhstan. I would too, but COVID happened and never opened the stock account, and so yeah.
Okay, well, it might not be too late. That's my Isaac Asimov, when I read the Foundation for the first time, 20, 30 years ago, I guess 40 years ago now. And if you read Isaac Asimov's Foundation, you realize that he's kind of pre-programming us to believe in a future that involves all of us happy people living on the surface getting energy from somewhere we don't know. We don't know how it appears, but this priestly class runs the energy. And of course, what it really is underground nuclear reactors that are providing the energy. Uh, I do believe that uranium and nuclear energy are going to be part of the world government, and that they're gonna own it all, and we're obviously going to have to pay for it at whatever price they want. As you say, they have a world monopoly on uranium, and that's the kind of thing that Warren Buffett's do. Corner the market on the most efficient way to provide energy that's been come up with yet, I think.
Yeah, Asimov's book, I haven't read it. It's been on my wish list for a while, Foundations. But it's funny because I read an article, it was last week. They talk about how scientists discover how to make electricity out of thin air. I bet they knew how to do that for a long time. They're just rediscovering it. But yeah, I don't know in the energy front. Well, we'll be paying with our carbon credits. Someone pointed to, who was it, Henry Ford or someone like a century ago, talking about basically Bitcoin. 100 years ago, they were discussing a new currency based on energy. And so, what a coincidence. This is all happening now, right? Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and energy, carbon credits. And so it seems like they've had this idea for a while. They just technically were not capable of carrying it out. And now we're reaching that time where they can, carry this stuff out. And, people like Dr. Mercola, whose work I very much enjoy, he knows a lot, he's big involved in all of this. His view is that they've got all their hands on the levers of power, the global, financially, globally, media, military. And so it's not looking good. Like they can pretty much steer us towards where they want to. And just going back to what you're saying, we shouldn't give up. We should keep fighting. We should try to peel back some of our sovereignty. So I'm not like a total cynic in that respect. We should always keep fighting. You never know the turn of events in history in this or that battle, and so, yeah.
There's something about just fundamental goodness of humanity. That I mean, I see it, in children. I see it, I see it in puppies. I see it in dogs. I mean, I'm a dog person, so when I get a chance to interact with a dog, I realize this dog is a happy, he's full of love. He's like, he comes from the source, whatever it is, spiritually. And I feel that we as people, if we have the facts, if you and I and thousands of others around the world can spread the facts, that people's goodness will rise above the tendency to just sit back and let things happen. And the key to me is facts. We've just got to keep on. I mean, I'm researching 10, 12 hours a day and doing everything I can. And here I am learning how to run obscure programs on my computer, which I never even heard of a computer when I went through school. So I mean, I did, but we didn't have them. We had punch cards that you could put in a machine and come back the next day and get your result. Now people are so good at running these things, and it's hopeful to me. And it certainly is great to have somebody with your depth and knowledge and experience. We must have opened a dozen subjects today, and I would really appreciate if you would come back and let me interview you some more with a little bit more depth into one or two of the very interesting experiences you have and the stuff that you know.
Yeah, I'm always happy to be on anybody's stream, and kudos to you. I'm still not technically capable when it comes to live streaming, so I still have never live streamed, and you're live streaming, so you're actually one upping me there. And I did want to just mention I came across a great quote by G.K. Chesterton the other day, which I posted on my socials, where he says, "Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. He that will lose his life, the same shall save it," is not a piece of mysticism for saints and heroes. It's a piece of everyday advice for sailors or mountaineers. It might be printed in an alpine guide or a drill book. You can only get away from death by continually stepping within an inch of it. If you want to live, and I mean truly live, you must desire life like water and drink death like wine. And that's sort of been my philosophy, where we have to be willing to lose our jobs, our economic status, our lives, yet be joyful. Never be like depressed. I'm not depressed, as you said. Enjoy. The sun is shining. When we finish, I go on my roof here in Mexico and tan, and so it's just like enjoy friends and enjoy the good stuff in life, but don't have this don't get depressed. Don't let them get to you. And I was interviewed not long ago, and I said, I'll laugh on my way to the gulag. They can't take your spirit, your mind, your joy, your faith. And so they can take everything else, but we should always have this chipper attitude, regardless of what happens.
Well, I must confess, I struggle with that sometimes, and I guess we all do. Thank you very much, Hrvoje Moric, for being with me this morning, and I look forward to the next time. Folks, be sure and check out Hrvoje's show on TNT Radio and his blog at Geopolitics and Empire. Any other tags you want to give to our folks to get in touch with you?
No, geopoliticsandempire.com. That's the best place.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good afternoon and evening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.